Best laid plans.
That's the way it goes. We'll call the meeting to order and welcome to the August Carmel Clay School Board Workshop. Thank you very much for joining us on your very first day of school for all of our teachers and administrators. We're very excited to have a board meeting to kick off the school year, and we are equally excited to have the next superintendent of Carmel Clay Schools in our audience, Dr. Nick Wall. And on Wednesday, we will cheerfully welcome all the students to the schools with fire trucks and smiles. Yes, fire trucks. So, not for a fire, just to celebrate. So, that being said, Mrs. Freed, can you please take roll?
Yes, Madam President, I've taken attendance and find that all board members are present.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I ask that following the pledge, please stand and stay standing for a moment of silence. We have a Carmel Clay School parent and teacher or employee of Carmel Clay Schools who tragically passed away in July, and we would like to honor her with a moment of silence. We have with us tonight a number of scouts, including Dave Bardos, who is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And with that, all scouts join the front. Thank you very much. And we do have a couple presentations tonight, and for presentations, as usual, we will turn to our superintendent to lead us.
I would call Brooke Watkins to the podium, please. Brooke is an assistant principal at Carmel High School and works with our AVID program. And she has with her tonight at least one student who's being recognized as our second student arrived. She's on her way.
She is on her way. Okay. So I'll talk briefly. But
somebody will be rushing in the door. But Brooke, there were three students actually who
correct,
participated,
yes.
Two of whom we hope to meet tonight. But Brooke, take it away.
Good evening, Superintendent, Interim Superintendent, new Superintendent, School Board. It's an honor for me to be here tonight to recognize three of our students that attended the Indianapolis Summer Institute Student Leadership Group for AVID this summer. The country has 6 to 8 different institutes around the country, and the last 2 or 3 years we've hosted one in Indianapolis. Part of that training, our AVID teachers go to learn how to teach the AVID course, as well as content area teachers go to learn how to teach, implement AVID strategies in their content area classes from science, English, math, social studies, and even other elective courses. Part of that training is they ask students to apply to be part of a program where the students come and interact with the teachers, both new teachers to the AVID program as well as experienced teachers, and they model a variety of activities and methods that they use in the AVID class. One example being a tutorial process where it's an inquiry-based group where students learn to ask and answer questions to help each other solve their problems related to the content that they're studying in their classes, and it varies from week to week. So I'm pleased to recognize Paige Gillig, who is here with us, if you could come forward. She's a senior and has been in the AVID class for 4 years. Brandon Russ couldn't be with us this evening, but he was also part of the group. Go ahead. Yeah. And then Lisa Perez, who will probably be running in here frantically. She was on her way, and Paige just spoke with her. But these students worked with a number of other AVID students across the state of Indiana. It wasn't just Carmel students. They were from all over, and they interacted with teachers. They had panel discussions. They modeled the practices they use in class. And I can say I was able to be part of one of their panel discussions and was very proud and pleased to have them represent not only our AVID program but our Carmel schools. So thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Oh, do we have a certificate for it?
I guess we do. She's getting. And Brooke, just interrupt us when the other young lady walks in. We can at least wave to her and tell her that,
Yes.
yeah, and give her her certificate as well. Thanks. Next, we have, going to introduce Mr. Dave Bardos to make the second special presentation. Unfortunately, I didn't know Mr. Bardos was going to be here tonight. Had I known that, we would have served Milk Duds as a little treat for everyone.
It's a very, very long story that Mr. Teagarden, Dr. Teagarden got me with several years ago, and earlier in my career when I was not quite so sophisticated.
We
Well,
tried
but
to end his career one day with Milk Duds. It
I
didn't
thought
work.
so. I thought so. But boys, I'd like you to join up here with me, if you could, please. Brad Buckhorn is with me as well, and Brad Buckhorn is the Scoutmaster of Troop 131. Tonight, it's my distinct pleasure to be representing the National Council of the Boy Scouts of America in recognizing Mrs. Layla Spannenberg with the Boy Scouts of America Honor Medal for Heroism. This recognition is bestowed on an individual who has displayed, quote, unusual heroism and skill in saving or attempting to save a life. Layla, would you join us? Board member Layla Spannenberg is an assistant scoutmaster with Troop 131 in Carmel, Indiana, sponsored by the Carmel United Methodist Church. On July the 19th, 2012, went on a high adventure outing with her unit in the Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area in Kentucky. Layla Spannenberg responded to calls for help from another adult hiking with her unit. He struck his head on an outcropping of rock as a result of a fall he had taken during a very treacherous uphill trek. Upon reaching Dr. Jesse Lee, Layla discovered Dr. Lee was bleeding profusely from a severe gash to his head, and Mr. Lee appeared to be in shock. Dr. Lee informed Layla that he suffered from severe high blood pressure, for which he was taking medication. Layla then began treating Dr. Lee for shock and head trauma, as well as monitored Dr. Lee's blood pressure with a blood pressure cuff that he carried with him. Her immediate concern was the physical location on the side of the steep ravine, coupled by the fact, of course, that Dr. Lee's blood pressure would not come down to an acceptable level that would allow the group to move him. The area was too remote for cell phone coverage, so based upon Layla's correct diagnosis of Dr. Lee's condition, the unit split into two groups. The first group was sent on ahead to continue with the hike with instructions to wait at the parking lot for the second group to arrive. The group with Layla stayed behind with Dr. Lee to stabilize him as best she could. Her group decided it would be best to descend down to a flatter base of the ravine where cell coverage would more likely be available. After carrying him down to the base, 911 was contacted, and after 2 hours of waiting, the rescue personnel came onto the scene. Ironically, the rescuers arrived on the scene without any means of hydration for themselves and seemed to be physically not very capable of handling much at that point. At that point, the group then would physically carry Dr. Lee the rugged 2 miles out in order to reach a road for safe transportation to a medical facility. The hike out took over 6 hours in 95-degree heat and high humidity over very difficult terrain. Layla continued to monitor Dr. Lee's blood pressure, continued to address his severe head trauma, at the same time gathered his complete medical history because their training taught her that the arriving rescuers would need that information in order to begin formal treatment of Dr. Lee. Layla directly attributes her actions on July 19th of 2012 to the training she received as an adult leader in the Boy Scouts of America and to the first aid and the outdoors training classes that she had taken prior to going on the high adventure trip with her troop. Layla was more than just prepared. She was ready to do her best, and her training taught her to be proactive in treating Dr. Lee in his life-threatening trauma. She not only treated Dr. Lee, but assisted the initial rescuers and used the resources her training provided during those difficult 2-mile trek to safer ground. Therefore, the Crossroads of America Council respectfully recommends Layla Spannenberg be awarded the Honor Medal of Heroism in her life-saving actions of July the 19th, 2012. I would now ask her Scoutmaster to present the award to her.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, and I get this. Thank you so very much.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry. Thanks,
Oh, yes? Where is she? Who is she?
We see
Stand up
somebody.
here and let us recognize you as well. You can come along and shake everyone's hand.
And I believe we have with us Louisa.
Yes.
Well, congratulations on your
Congratulations,
Avid Award.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Louisa, maybe you need to take one of the Scouts orienting or whatever it is course, but we're glad you found us.
Thank you. We are going to take just a couple-minute break for those who might want to depart and enjoy the last few minutes of summer break before.
Except for the Scouts, we expect you to remain present till the bitter end.
So we'll reconvene in about 1 minute. So if you would like to exit, you're welcome to do so.
Spannenbergs don't need more than one invitation. See you, Alexander.
Exactly. And William's like, I have to earn that one yet.
Yeah. Hey, that wasn't nothing.
It was. No, at Purdue Pharmacy Training.
Yeah, what is she talking about? Yeah. Angie. Well, sorry.
It is kind of cool. I had no idea. It was a huge surprise.
Well, it happened when he explained all the things that he did. Stuff for me. Yeah, it was. Don't tell me it was nothing.
It was a surprise. Well, thank you for your patience, everybody. First thing on our, actually next, we've got our consent. May I get a motion to approve consent?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Consent passes. First discussion item, Dr. Dillon.
Thank you, members of the board, Dr. Teagarden, Dr. Wall. It's my pleasure this evening to present to the board for a first reading. It's going to be kind of a unique situation this evening. We're going to do a first reading and hopefully a second reading. Indiana legislature was very busy last year and passed some new legislation that affects schools. One of the pieces of legislation that they passed was a new revised anti-bullying law. There's several components to this new anti-bullying law that will affect our schools. The good news is I'm happy to report that Carmel Clay Schools for years has taken this subject very seriously. We have a curriculum in every one of our schools that's implemented by our administration and our counselors and our teachers. We have administrators who very dutifully investigate any claims of bullying that any of our students or someone else will bring to their attention. And where appropriate, we will apply consequences to the bully. We will provide counseling for the victim. We will provide education to the bully so that they will learn that they should not do those kinds of behaviors. We have an anonymous alert program that, with the help of my friends in the technology department, we've had for going on 3 years now. Those are all pieces of this new revised law that we were very well ahead of the curve on. And so I'm very pleased with that. We'll never stop helping our students that need assistance. We'll never stop trying to rid bullying of our schools. But we have a couple pieces of the new law that we must respond to. and therefore, that's why I bring to you tonight for a first reading, a new policy for Carmel Clay Schools, Policy 5517.01. This policy tonight has been recommended to us by our legal counsel. We also received a very similar version of this policy from our friends at Neola at the same time. The Indiana State Department of Education is in the process, their legal counsel, of writing up a model policy for us. Unfortunately for them, I believe that they had a kind of an impossible timeline on this. With the law taking place July 1st, schools have started across the state on August 1st. We're starting on Wednesday. They have yet to provide us that model policy. However, we need to be in compliance. We're good scouts, as you saw this evening. And therefore, it would be to our benefit to be in compliance with the new Indiana law, which requires us to have a policy when school starts for anti-bullying. Therefore, brought to you for your consideration, we've emailed this to you, made this available to you, have this policy this evening that has been written and crafted by our legal counsel. We are viewing this as an interim policy. It is quite possible that when we receive the policy from the Indiana Department of Education, I will be back again asking you to revise and review this policy. But this policy is very good, it's very well written by our attorneys, and it does reflect the law, and it would put us in compliance should you choose to pass this policy tonight. I will pull the policy up for your review. Also would like to add that it is unique that we would come to you tonight and ask for you to pass a policy on a first reading. Our typical routine with policies would be to bring a policy to your attention for a first reading, wait a period of time until the next school board meeting, bring it back for a second reading. That would give you time to ask questions, reflect. It also would give time for our community to ask questions of us about the policy. You do have the ability under one of your bylaws in an emergency situation to adopt a policy. Then we would come back again at your next school board meeting, bring it back for a second reading, and ask for you to re-adopt it at that time. So I bring to you policy 5517.01 on anti-bullying.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dillon.
You're welcome.
I open it up to discussion. Yes, Mrs. Freed.
Is there adequate training for the teachers involved? I mean, I know they report it to an administrator, but what about teachers in the classroom being alert to note passing and name calling?
Sure. That's a good question. Another part of this law, which we still are waiting on, is that by October 15th of each school year, all staff of Carmel Clay Schools and all students will receive an age-appropriate bullying curriculum. That curriculum is being taught or is being developed right now by the Indiana Department of Education. We await for that to arrive. Once that arrives, we will make sure that our staff receives that bullying curriculum training as soon as humanly possible, and then we'll put a plan in place to deliver that curriculum to our students. I believe that since the law is very clear about reporting, I'm anticipating that that curriculum will also be very clear on that subject.
Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mrs. Spangenberg. Dr. Dillon, do we keep figures on the rates of bullying currently?
We currently keep in our system two pieces of information. We track all student discipline in our student database, PowerSchool, and that is reported to the Indiana State Department of Education each year after the school year is over. We report that to them, and bullying is one of the situations that we would report. We also started about a year ago a new module in PowerSchool that allows us to track the victim side of the story. We always were very, very good at tracking the bully or the fighter or whoever the student was that caused a disciplinary infraction. We kept good details about that, what the consequence was, but many times, and a lot of times because of privacy, we didn't always put the other side of the story, the victim's name in there. We now have started tracking that in our schools. That also is a new part of this law. The Indiana Department of Education will be requiring very detailed reporting. We have not seen that yet, and we anticipate that coming again very shortly from the Department of Education.
Excellent. I, of course, am interested in having a way of measuring the effectiveness of our new policy after a period of time, of course. So
Absolutely.
I hope that the board would be provided with some assessment from yourself as to possible areas for further improvement, if possible.
I can assure you that we review all those statistics on an annual basis, and I'd be happy to come back and share those with you in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Hackett?
Yeah, thank you. I know we've been waiting since the legislation came through for a policy like this and the guidance, so I appreciate it. Excuse me, bringing that forward. My questions really have to do with a couple areas of specific wording. My first question has to do with the definition under B. Bullying is defined as overt, unwanted, repeated acts or gestures, et cetera, and we have an anti-harassment policy that included the language does not have to include repeated incidents. And I remember asking about this specifically. Can you just talk a little bit about the bullying definition versus a harassment definition?
I'll do my absolute best to do that. If I am a student and I make fun of somebody one time in an inappropriate way about their weight, about their heritage, about something about them, that's harassing behavior, and that's unacceptable. That hasn't met the definition of bullying. Bullying has to be multiple times of the harassing behavior. Now, interestingly enough, the new law modifies that just a little bit, because prior to July 1st, it had to be repetitive behavior from one individual. Now, my friend and I can pick on someone. There's two of us. It's repetitive, and now that meets the definition of bullying under the new law.
Okay,
A little bit different twist.
Thank you.
I think that the law has been rewritten and revised to address group bullying against one individual or one or more individual, which takes place. If one person had bullied someone, had harassed someone, and they were brought in the office and told to stop, and they do, but their friend picks up, and then they're told to stop, and they do, and then the third friend picks up, well, it never met the definition of bullying because it wasn't repetitive by one person. Now, it has to be just repetitive towards the same individual, and it could be by different people.
Okay, thank you. That
You're welcome.
clarifies it quite a bit. My second question has to do on number 4, the third bullet point. Participating in an activity consisting of the exercise of a student's freedom of speech rights. These are what bullying does not include. Can you speak a little bit about how one crosses the line or doesn't cross the line with the argument of freedom of speech?
That's a very slippery slope. That is from the, I'll do my best. That is, by the way, directly from the law. And I would believe that this would apply to a situation that if I were participating in a protest that was protected speech, I had the right to protest. Might be a subject that's very difficult, might be a subject that some people find offensive, but I have the ability under my freedom of speech to participate in that protest. The school is not going to view my participation as an act of bullying against anyone.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my third question, if I could, if you just go down further past those bullet points, C, and it talks about where it's applicable, the policy is applicable. This policy may be applied regardless of the physical location in which the bullying behavior occurs, and basically goes on saying wherever it occurs if all people involved are the bully and the bullied are in the same school corporation. I bet I already know your opinion on this, but...
That is the most dramatic change in this law, in my opinion.
And how do we as a school system approach, I'll just say my opinion, more of the parents' role if something takes place in an area, I don't know, church camp 20 miles away, or who knows?
Well, let me tell you how we approached that in the past. So Monday morning comes, and we get an anonymous alert that a student was bullied at a party over the weekend. And we get those. We will investigate, we always have, bring the student in, check on the student, see how the student's doing, see if the student needs counseling with this situation because they could be emotionally distraught over the situation. We'll find out if anything has carried into the school. We would bring in the person that was accused of the bullying, investigate, talk to them. We would call both homes, and let the parents know that this took place and ask the parents to deal with this. We will do exactly the same thing now that I just described, only the next step is we now may apply a consequence for off-school behavior.
Is this
So-
part of the area that IDOE will be giving some guidance on?
This is part of the area that our attorneys will be providing
Okay.
extensive guidance on. We have been asked by our attorneys that when we step into this new area, that we contact them and they would like to walk with us side by side as we go through this. I think the important piece to this is we may apply a consequence. Does not mean that we automatically will. We will investigate. We will help our student. We will educate the bully. We will contact the parents. We did all that before. The only difference, in my opinion, is, and I realize I'm simplifying something that really is big, but we now have the authority under this Indiana law to apply a consequence. And I can't believe that every time we will, but that incident could be the 15th time that we've dealt with that student bullying the other student. And it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. It could be such a magnitude that it shocks you as to what took place, and that could cause us to apply a consequence. It's new territory. It gives us the authority, when two of our students are involved, to apply a consequence, when appropriate, for off-campus weekend behavior, or summer behavior, or winter break, or fall break, anytime we're not in school.
What's the school corporation's responsibility in finding out about these instances?
There's no obligation for us to actively pursue scouring the World Wide Web looking for instances of bullying that took place in social media, but it is our obligation when it becomes our knowledge, when someone informs us, to do all the things that I've talked about.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I also have a question, Dr. Dillon.
Yes?
I know that the most significant component to the new law is the jurisdiction, the scope of jurisdiction for the school system, since we have been implementing all of the other parameters that are included. How are we going to be communicating with the parents, with the students, with the families, what we are going to, by law, what we're responsible for doing?
Well, my plan will be to work with Tricia Reynolds tomorrow after you pass this policy, hopefully, and we'll let the community know that we have a new policy. When the new curriculum arrives, we'll be using that opportunity to announce to the parents that their students will be receiving new curricular education from the Indiana Department of Education about anti-bullying. And so I believe we'll just thread this into our already effective communication with our parents. As I've said, the good news is we do 99% of this already. It's not new news. It's not something brand new that all of a sudden now we're going to start helping bullies. We've done that for years, or helping the victims. We've done that for years. The new pieces are the curricular piece and the jurisdiction piece. And I will be working with Tricia Reynolds to put that out, to let everyone know that now under this law, this is our jurisdiction to deal with.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Knauss?
One question on E. It says, anyone who believes that a student has possibly been or is the victim of bullying is encouraged to immediately report the situation. What do we mean by immediately, and by what means can a teacher do that?
A teacher could do, immediately would be, in my opinion, that same day, that same hour, that same 5-minute segment, if appropriate. It's all become circumstantial, Mrs. Nels. As you know, we've talked about things like this before. I wouldn't expect a teacher to leave her classroom unattended to go to the office to report it. However, I would expect the teacher, if it was severe enough, the situation, to ask someone to cover their class so that they could go find their administrator to report it. Certainly to pick up the phone and call the office and ask the administrator to come down. Certainly to send an email and then follow up. I need to see you as soon as possible. Please come down to my office.
Okay.
In today's electronic world, there's lots of opportunities for us to reach out and contact someone. Our administrators are very aware of this new law. We've had lots of conversations with them already. We will continue to have conversations with them. I've promised them as new pieces come, I will be talking to them. And again, teachers have reported bullying already. It's not
Right.
new for us. It's
Right.
something we do as part of our craft.
Right, but I was just wondering by what means, so they wouldn't have to necessarily leave the classroom, take the student to the office or whatever, and
The
that
answer
would
to
be
that
the only
is
way that...
Possibly. It depends on the situation.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other areas of discussion? Okay, thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you
Dillon.
very much. Be back in a
We
little
look
bit.
forward to seeing you in a couple minutes. Next on the agenda, we have Ms. Christy Cloud going to be speaking on the Financial Human Resources Software Proposal.
Good evening, board members. Get this pulled up here to be able to show you our presentation this evening. Just as we are beginning a new school year, we are also excited about a potential transition to a new human resource and new financial system for our school district. And the software has the title of New World that you'll see illustrated here in our presentation. So I want to bring you up to speed on where we are with financial and human resource software within this district. We've had our current solution, which is from Regional Data Systems, for approximately 20 years. So think back to 1994 area. That's about when we adopted this solution. You see a screenshot of that solution on the right-hand side here. So we're still using a solution that a little black screen with some green text on it to give you a little bit of an idea of what our staff deals with on a day in and day out basis. The system is built on an AS400 platform, which means it's very proprietary and doesn't really tie up to industry standards of systems such as a SQL, Microsoft SQL backend. We still use tape backups for this solution versus being able to back up the solution to a cloud or to a remote location. And we must physically touch any computer that we want to install this software on and do a manual process, configure printers manually, and all of those types of things. There's limited fields in this solution, which means if we need to start tracking a new piece of information to meet a federal or state requirement, we have to pay the software programmers to customize the solution, add fields for us, and make changes. Then they also have to write a way for us to get that information out of the system. Since it has a proprietary back end, we're not able to just go in and fetch the data when we need it. So we started a process about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago in 2011 to start looking for potential solutions. And this has not come without a lot of discussion and a lot of collaboration around the building users of this software as well as the users in this building, because changing financial and human resource software is a big deal. It's the solution that allows teachers and staff members to be paid. So when we make a change like this, we want to make it and make it well and be very effective in that process. So we identified a few key factors to help us select some vendors. It had to have a SQL or Microsoft SQL backend. We wanted it to be a web-based solution so it would have easier access, be available from any station. And we wanted it to be used in Indiana schools. Either Roger or David could speak specifically to the chart of accounts that are used in Indiana and how those are a little different than the accounting that is done in other districts in the nation, and that's why it was important that we found something that somebody else in Indiana was using and had tested the water with to make sure it was going to meet our needs. And then finally, for our building level colleagues, it had to have a user interface that was very intuitive. The black screen with the green letters is a fear factor for any new employee who comes in and has to work within the system. So we started a period of product evaluations. We had vendor webinars. We had on-site visits by vendors, vendor demos. We had focus groups of people come over to see the software. And then we also made customer satisfaction calls and referral checks with surrounding districts that had used the different software packages. And we finally came to consensus that the solution we would like to select is called New World Systems. It meets all of our criteria. It's web-based. It has the industry standard background. It doesn't require a client install on the local computer. It's very robust in its reporting, so when our financial team or our human resource team needs to get some data out to share with you or to share with their superintendent, they're able to do that without having to call someone to build a report for them. It has some great analytics tools. We've gone that way in data that's available through Pinnacle for teachers, but we don't have that same type of data available for our financial and human resource users. And so I'm pleased to say that this solution has that. Because it offers standardized backups, we could back up to the cloud or remote disaster recovery location, which will be part of this solution as well, that we will be able to back up from this location to Creekside and vice versa, so that we would have disaster recovery in the event of a tornado or other disaster. And happily, it has been implemented in several school districts now. There are 3 named here, and I think we're, pending your approval, we would be, I think, the 7th district in Indiana to move to this solution. Lots of overall benefits. No more green and black screen, so the user interface is more like being on a website, very intuitive, which will automatically reduce training for us, make it much easier for the end user. The biggest transition, I think, for us will be date-based events. What I mean by that is if a employee knows they're going to be married in 3 weeks, we know their name is going to change, we can put that in the system, and in 3 weeks the system is going to remind us to make that event. Or if it's one we know for certain is going to happen on that date, the wedding could always fall through, it will automatically change the event on that date. Currently, we have no way of doing that. So everything has to be kind of wait until the actual date gets here, then make the change on that date. So this will really improve practices for our staff. It also has an improved workflow. So when any of those events happen, for example, a staff member is going to get married, it's important for the benefits department to know that so that they can make the changes in the benefits. And for the payroll department to know that so they can change deductions as necessary. There is a process that does that now, but it's not very granular. So everybody might find out that that employee, everybody who gets the notification finds out the employee is getting married, whether their department needs that information or not. So it will allow us to be more specific in who gets the information. I'm really excited about the trial environment. I think David will be excited about the trial, and Roger, because it will give us a playground environment where we can try out the budget, see what this is going to do in the numbers without having to do a whole lot of manual work to try out those numbers. We can wipe it clean if that proposal doesn't work and try something else to see how that works out. We don't have any sort of trial environment with our current solution, so this is a great add. Exporting capabilities, because it's SQL-based, not only can our technology team on the back end help get information out and integrate it in our existing analytics, the users of the system will have modules right in Excel where they can click, 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 and select the different pieces of data that they need to present to you or to another group of folks. User security, again, we have user security in our current system. It works, but it's not very granular. So if we want to be able to give a secretary a right to just one account perhaps for their school versus having to give them 5 or 6 accounts, we'll be able to break that really down into small chunks. And it's really going to simplify remote access because it doesn't require us to install a piece of software on every single computer. We have to still provide a way for the user to emulate being at the district, but we don't have to do all of that extra installation. So I asked Ryan and David to help provide a few tips as to how this might help their departments respectively. So we see some benefits to human resources here. I won't read you every single one of those or Ryan's quotes, but a couple of them that I want to point out are the historical contracts. Our current solution allows us to keep last, current, and next as far as contracts. The new solution will allow us to keep for any employee an unlimited number of contracts, so we can see that historically across time. Position tracking and budgeting, those kind of go together in the fact that, again, we can very clearly see how each individual position affects the budget moving forward versus budgeting more in a larger picture. The last one there, interface with the attendance software, will help us reduce redundant data entry. Teachers or staff members currently call into the system, report an absence. Then we turn around and have a staff member put that in paper to submit or in electronic format. And then we turn around and have a secretary put that into the financial system. With this type of solution, we can interface our existing ASOP subfinder along with New World and cut out 2 of those people having to redundantly input data, thus allowing us to be a lot more accurate in the payroll process. Okay. So we have some benefits to the financial team as well. Budgeting right now, any type of budgeting information that David and Roger work on is all kind of manually put in. Now they'll be able to create those budgets and spreadsheets and that type of thing and then import them into the system without doing that all manually. They'll have the employee timesheet piece. They spend lots of hours manually checking those timesheets right now, and because the employee could be putting it directly into the system, there'll be lots of error checking built in, which will free up a lot of staff resources as far as tracking on those things. Purchase orders. This will really allow items to get to the teachers in the classroom much quicker. Again, same sort of process. I hand my secretary the request for what I want to purchase. They go in and fill it out in the system. Then that gets faxed or emailed. With this system, potentially the teacher could put their purchase order in directly. It gets the appropriate approval, and it goes immediately from this system to the vendor. No faxing, emailing, that type of thing. The system handles it all. So we really hope that this will expedite a lot of processes. You'll see that the total cost for the proposal is right at about $600,000. We plan to use our existing CPF budget. It's not a cheap undertaking to replace a financial system, but we also have not had a huge investment in this system in the last 20 years. And so these are our next steps that we plan to take. Tonight, we're here to present this recommendation for you to consider this proposal. For the next 2 weeks, I'd like to entertain any questions you have and work with our legal team to review the contract that's been set forth by the company, get the legal team's opinion, work back and forth with the company to have any clarification. I'd like to come back before you on the 26th to ask for your approval to move forward with this contract. We'll finalize and negotiate the contract in September, and then in October actually be able to kick off the project and begin hardware acquisition. And then we'll have about a 15-month period in which we will convert the data and move forward. This isn't a project that's going to move quickly, as we're talking about 20 years worth of data that's going to be kind of put on the shelf and moving to a new system. We're looking at converting approximately the past 5 years of data. If we go back too much farther than that, pieces start to exist in your data. You change practices and how you did things. So carrying over too much data won't be beneficial to the team. So there'll be, the more data we take in, the more cleanup we have to do as well. And then we will look at a launch in January 2015 so that all the tax information will stay within 1 calendar year. So with that, are there questions that I can answer for you immediately? Or one of the colleagues who's been involved in this process as well?
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Cloud. I'll entertain questions. We'll start with Pam this time.
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering, it sounds like a really nice system. It's going to alleviate a lot of problems. What about the traffic that will be moving back and forth in the system? Will it always be able to handle all of the information, all of the inputting, and everybody working on it at the same time?
Yes, because of the changes we've made this summer in our wide area network to increase the bandwidth between locations, that shouldn't be a problem. In addition, this software package is used by many of the cities in Indiana and surrounding states as well, so it's been tested on a larger number, because when you see the schools that are here, they're much smaller than Carmel Clay schools. But this software is also used in larger school districts in Michigan, and their municipality software is also used, so we'll be able to handle that traffic.
Okay. One more question. And will the cost, how much will the program cost per year, or is this just an initial cost?
This is the initial cost. I can send you an email. I'll follow up with the whole board as to the renewal cost on a yearly basis.
And it will always come out of the CPF money?
It is always a CPF expenditure, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hackett.
One question of mine bounces off Pam's as far as, and you can include that information together, what is our ongoing cost now with our current program? So we can have a comparison. And then my only other comment is, in this 2 weeks, your next step anticipated a vote in our next regular meeting. If in that time we can get the thoughts of Dr. Wall, since he very well may be involved in the usage of that might be a good idea too.
Absolutely. It was one of the first emails I sent to him last week when he was announced to us, so that he was privy to all of this before, obviously, this evening, and I'll be sure to follow up with him directly on his feedback.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Spanenberg. First of all, Mrs. Cloud, congratulations for finally getting to this point. This is wonderful to, yes, it's been a long, hard road. I'm sure that your friends in Human Resources and the business office are excited and relieved.
They are indeed.
Now, this is not like buying an automobile or a house where it's a sale and then it's done. It's more like a marriage between the school corporation and this company. So I'll be very interested to know whatever you can share with us either tonight or eventually about New World. You know, their financial stability, the kinds of assistance they're prepared to give to you and to Ryan and Roger and David and so forth, going down the long road together.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to put together some statements about that specifically in an email to all of you. They have established a new K-12 advisory commission, which they've offered us to have a role directly on that advisory table. They'd actually like to host that users group here at Carmel Clay Schools and help us be a leader in that regard. They've also presented to Roger a couple unique opportunities that they're interested in potentially partnering with us for students, as well as potential internships or a scholarship opportunity for some kids as a partnership that they can give back to our district moving forward. And they do have an extensive support team to support their municipal group as well as their K-12 group. But I'll put some specifics in an email for you.
Just one more question. Is this an Indiana-based company, did you say?
No, they are based out of Michigan.
Out of Michigan. Okay, thanks.
Okay. I do have a couple other questions as well. The fees that you referenced, close to $600,000, how does that compare to other programs that we could adopt, other, software?
The couple other selections that we looked at were also approximately in the same market. We did not get down to the final dollar-to-dollar comparison between vendors because none of the other products clearly met all of our requirements and met the feature set that our end users really needed to have. So it came down to finding the best product regardless. Not that cost wasn't an issue, but because the others were in the same area, that became one of the lower items on the total pool.
Okay, and in that total fee, does that include the initial training that individuals will need? And then is that ongoing training? Is that included in that, or is that going to be an additional expense that we need to consider?
That's a great question. We will likely be able to maintain the ongoing training within our own technology team, but the initial training is all included with the purchase.
Thank you. Other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much. We
Thank
look
you.
forward to getting your email. Thank you. And moving right along, Dr. Dillon, we have the approval of policy 1517.01.
You couldn't change ties or something.
I thought about it, but I could take it. It's actually choking me. It's been 10 weeks. Okay, so we're back. This is unique. We don't normally come right back up, but as we explained earlier, this does rise to the occasion of an emergency situation for Carmel Clay Schools. Not that it's an emergency and there's going to be someone harmed if we don't have this policy or we don't take this action, but we want to be in compliance. The law has asked us to be, and we're doing our due diligence to bring this to you tonight to ask you to do this. I appreciate your consideration for that because normally we give you lots of time to reflect and sleep on these and ask questions. You've asked some great questions. Thank you very much. And your bylaw, by the way, 0131.1, allows you to do this in emergency situations.
Thank you very much,
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Dillon.
Thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is to approve policy 5517.01, anti-bullying. May I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. I actually have a discussion point that I just want to share with everybody. And basically, while discussing and taking action is not consistent with our practice, since this has been deemed an emergency by council to have this on the book before we get started, I did want to reference our policy, our bylaw 0131.1 with the actual wording that I think we need to consider is any resolution adopted under emergency condition shall expire automatically at the first public meeting of the board following the abatement of the emergency unless the board moves to adopt said resolution in final form. So that being said, should we adopt this evening, which I'm hopeful we will, but should we adopt this evening, we will need to formally adopt this policy again on August the 26th. So I just wanted to remind you that that will be on the agenda should we move forward. Any other discussion? Mrs. Tackett?
I guess along those lines, and Dr. Dillon mentioned that this is an interim policy anyway because they're waiting for guidance from IDOE. So sometime within the next year or so, we'll be visiting this topic again.
Hopefully sooner than
Absolutely, and yes, I agree with that, hopefully sooner than a year. The first thing that we will do when the recommended policy from the Department of Education arrives is sit down with that policy, compare it to our policy that you are adopting this evening, ask our legal counsel to compare those two, and it could very well be that our legal counsel has done such an excellent job that our policy will stand. Could be that we have to briefly modify it just a little bit, or it could be we'll totally adopt the one from the Department of Education and take down the ones we're currently adopting.
You know, Steve, to be a little proactive, I would suggest if this is adopted tonight, and I also hope it will be, I think this should be forwarded to Department of Education. It might facilitate their work on adopting a policy to get out
I
to
will
everybody.
absolutely look into that tomorrow morning.
Any other discussion? Okay, so let's take a vote. All in favor of approving policy 5517.01, anti-bullying, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mr. Newman, exception to the nepotism policy.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to bring for the board's consideration this evening a recommendation to approve an exception to Board Policy 3120.02, nepotism and relatives. Reporting to relatives is the name of the policy, and I would request that exception to the policy as the policy allows for the board to grant exceptions to the policy. We've requested your consideration in order for us to hire Jill Nows, a teacher candidate that's been recommended by one of our school principals. She's been determined to be the best candidate for a teaching position at that school, and as such, I believe that the board granting this exception in order for us to hire her is in the best interest of the school district. But in order for us to proceed with that, we would need for the board to consider and approve an exception to that policy on nepotism.
Thank you very much for your explanation, Mr. Newman. So the recommendation is to approve the exception to our nepotism policy. May I get a motion?
I so move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Discussion. Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Newman, there's been some additional discussion about what guidance could administrators provide to the board to understand what situations might warrant an exception. And I think Dr. Teagarden helpfully elucidated some of that, but I think it'd be worth repeating.
Yes, thanks for the question, Mr. Phillips. I think what's most important is certainly someone whose position is closer to the board level, obviously a superintendent, or perhaps someone of that level or very near the board. It might be more concerning, if I were a board member, I guess I would say, I'm not telling you what to do, but it would be more concerning for me as a board member to approve an exception for someone in our employment that close to the school board. And also, the other thing that I think we would look at is the chain of command. Obviously, this teacher will report to her principal, and that principal then reports to folks over here, and then on down the line, it's several lines or several chains from the school board level. And I think that would be my advice to the board. And I don't know, Dr. Dillon and I haven't discussed this too much, but at some point maybe we would want to consider with the policy committee. Maybe we need to further define that in the policy. And of course we would take legal counsel to help us do that. But that's what I would suggest, Greg. I think we just need to look at the chain of command and how many levels between the relative, and it's not just board members, as you know. This policy applies to administrators and other employees. In this case, it happens to be with a board member. But so I think you would look at the degrees of chain of command. And Dr. Teagarden might be going to press his button and might have something to say.
I am, as a matter of fact, very discerning there, Mr. Newman. I think, Greg, another thing that I put in that memo that I sent to you that in my mind gives you a reason to maintain the policy and have this opportunity for granting an exception. A concern that I would have is if there's evidence of influence or undue influence or exercise of authority over a decision maker, then I think that would warrant, certainly not making an exception to the policy. So again, as I said in that memo, I think it is something that probably after this action, which I strongly suggest that you take as has been proposed, but there probably could be some additional clarification that would be helpful.
And I think it's worth noting for the public that there has been no influence by the board member in this instance. That
None that we could uncover.
And I've looked hard, trust me. No, we wouldn't have made, we wouldn't have made the recommendation had we felt that way. But Dr. Teagarden's points are exactly right. If that were to happen, I think we would be more concerned about it, and we might not recommend it, to be honest, although that would be awkward. But I have to give Ms. Now's credit. I mean, she reached out to me early and asked if this person could even apply. And, of course, my answer is absolutely. We want the best people to apply. I didn't know if she was going to be the best person, and from there, I don't think there was any contact with any administrator or with me. And if she's the best candidate for the position, that's who we want for the children at Forestdale Elementary. And so thus the recommendation.
Any other? Okay, I just want to comment that actually I really appreciate this recommendation. When we included the exception clause in May when we approved this new policy or the update to our existing nepotism policy, the focus and the goal is to hire and retain the best possible candidates in any position to benefit our students. So I'm really excited that you brought this forward so we could do just that. Any other discussion? Okay, then we're ready to take a vote. All in favor of supporting the exception to the nepotism policy for this employee or future employee signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Pam?
Abstain.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you.
And we turn to Mr. McMichael for the pedometer program.
Thank you. I'm excited to make this recommendation to the board that you approve a 3-year pedometer program with Virgin Health. At the last board meeting, we gave a rather extensive report detailing the specifics of the program, but we really feel that, one, from a financial standpoint, we have received some one-time stimulus money that we have an opportunity to use those funds to cover the cost of this program. And so I see the potential to use what otherwise would be one-time money to provide a recurring benefit. All the statistics would suggest that this program will more than pay for itself. It should save us money, but we don't anticipate just assuming that to be the case. We do intend to do a very thorough analysis of the program as it goes on in partnership with Purdue University, actually. And so we fully expect to be able to confirm what our suspicions are in terms of it being a very positive step in terms of the financial standpoint. We also think that it very much is another step in moving us toward developing a culture of wellness, which we're very excited about that effort as well. And I'm confident this program will be a great morale booster for our employees. We know from other employers and some of our own employees that they're very excited about the possibilities of this program, and so I think it's really a good opportunity for us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. McMichael. So our recommendation is to approve the pedometer program. May I get a motion? Mr. Phillips.
I move approval of the recommended program for 3 years.
Sounds good. Discussion. Mr. Phillips.
I think I understand the economics here, Roger, but it sounds like, and bear with me if I'm repeating, but it sounds like we're using one-time money, stimulus money, to invest in a program which seemingly has a very good chance of reducing our outlays of our recurring expense for insurance. Am I right on that?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. As I'd mentioned previously, we spend almost $17 million a year for health care costs. Or that's the cost of the entire program. We share that expense with our employees who pay part of that premium as well. So if this program makes any difference at all in terms of that total cost, it would very easily more than offset what the cost of the program is.
Again, I have to congratulate you for coming up with, I think, just a very clever idea that's going to benefit the corporation. It'll allow us to hire more teachers if this works out as we expect it will.
Yes.
Other discussion, questions? I just have one for you, Roger. The stimulus funds. The board has received some emails from individuals wanting us to use the stimulus funds to hire counselors or teachers. Can you define how we can use those stimulus dollars, please?
Well, we've received different stimulus dollars for different purposes. This particular money is targeted specifically for health care and lowering the cost of health care. We did receive about 2.5 or 2.6 million of stimulus funds that was used for staffing and as basically a part of our general fund revenue.
Okay.
Which was far more. We received actually far more there than we did for this purpose.
So this is strictly restricted to reducing health care
Health-related
funds?
issues, yes.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much. Other questions or discussion? Great. Looks like we're ready to take a vote. All in favor of supporting a pedometer program at Carmel Clay Schools for 3 years, signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have reports, and our report is going to be brought to us by, moving right along, Mr. McMichael.
Another one. Yes, a number of weeks ago, I met with Jack Berry with the Carmel Dads Club, and the conversation was focused on artificial turf for play fields. And the Dads Club was considering turfing some of their property for this purpose. And as Jack and I spoke, the question was raised as would we be better to partner in this effort, as we have, as you know, for over 50 years with the Dads Club. And so that led to some conversations about the possibilities at Carmel High School and what we might do there. In 2014, we had already planned to replace the turf at the football field, and that, as you know, that turf has been there for, I believe, 10 years. And so we're not starting from scratch there, but just replacing the surface itself. But we also plan to include in our 2014 capital budget turfing of the soccer field. And you've seen that for a number of years, and that we've had that as a plan, and we're finally getting to the point where we're ready to recommend we do that next year. And so as Jack and I discussed this this partnering possibility, the thinking was as if, and the possibility was to turf two practice fields north of the stadium. Some time ago, I shared with the board a longer-term goal of turfing those two fields, and ultimately considering turfing a field at each of our middle schools. We've just had tremendous success with what we did at the football field, and Jim Inskeep will speak to that in a minute. But the additional use of turfing that field has provided to the high school has just been tremendous. And if I can manage to get it up here, I'll have an overhead or visual that find out where it's at here. But most of you know, the public may not be as aware, but there is very little grassy area at the high school. When you consider there's almost 5,000 students there. The amount of grass area for all the programs is just very limited. And we're not talking about just, we're not talking about athletics as much really as during the day, which got all the physical education programs. In terms of extracurricular, you've got all the performing arts and the band and so forth, and as well as certainly the athletic programs. But the majority of that space is actually used for the instructional program during the day. And so I'm going to ask Jimmy to start by help me get this up here. But where's that? Here. By speaking as to how this would benefit the high school, and then Jack will make some comments with regard to the Dads Club.
Thank you, Mr. McMichael, and thank you for your listening on this proposal and some of the thoughts that we're sharing with use of green space at Carmel High School. One of the major benefits of kind of thinking through this plan and expanding the artificial turf projects that we have going on at the high school as the central location of it in relation to all of Clay Township and all of the students that we serve. As Jack Berry from the Carmel Dads Club will mention here shortly, there's a significant number of our children here in Clay Township that are served, over 10,000 of our students in one way, shape, or form. And obviously a lot of the things that they do are things that are outside. We have a tremendous amount of infrastructure that's already in place at Carmel High School, including parking, restrooms, concessions, et cetera, that could be utilized for this, which is something if placed elsewhere, either by the Carmel Dads Club or through a partnership with Carmel Clay Schools, would also result in having to outlay a lot more money, additional money, in putting in new structures. So this is something I think is really a best use and best practices use of existing infrastructure that's already in place. When we put the artificial turf in during 2005 at the football stadium, we saw a tremendous increase in the use of that facility. We have a multi-million-dollar facility that was being used only X number of hours a year based on weather conditions, really. And as we know, grass is really a consumable item. And so once it goes bare, that's pretty much it, so to speak. So we saw a lot of increase, obviously, in the use of it, including actually over 5 times the amount of use in that first year alone when we started tracking the use of the football field for hours for a number of different groups. And when I say a number of different groups, not only our programming at the high school, but expansion of a lot of our different community partnerships that we have going on. Where we're at right now is obviously expanded use of programming, not only through Carmel Clay Schools, but we've also seen a lot of changes in the last 10 years, to the point where we have a very involved lacrosse program in Carmel, in Clay Township, which is not formally a part of Carmel High School, and something we would like to see adopted as a varsity sport at Carmel High School, and this would also aid in that benefit. It currently exists down to the first grade level in a feeder program through the Carmel Dads Club, and the numbers are just going off the charts year to year in that, and the popularity here in this our city and community. So that's just one of many things, but also expansion of a lot of different community groups that use it, to the point where we have many, many more requests for the existing one turf field at the school than can ever be utilized by those different groups, and they're all qualifying groups under our facility use agreement through Carmel Clay Schools that's board approved. So with that, I know Roger has pulled up the photo here, and probably want to speak to what that looks like.
I do. You can see where Murray Stadium's at right here. So that's, of course, grass, and then directly across from that is a grassy field, basically, that is used for some activities. The 2 practice fields that I'm referring to are up just north of the stadium. There's actually 3 of them there, as you can kind of see from this overhead. So we would be talking about turfing 2 of the 3. But you can see just how limited the grassy area is for this complex. If I were to show you what's available at Creekside, for example, as a middle school, has far more green space than this high school, and yet it's less than a third the size of the high school. So we just think this would be a real opportunity from a financial standpoint to and benefit to the community to be able to share our resources, and then, of course, to share the usage of those resources. We are in a good position in terms of our capital fund to be able to pay for this through our capital funding, and we believe if we do this all together, we surely would benefit from a volume standpoint in terms of the pricing. So that's what we would be hopeful of, and pretty certain that there would be a benefit to doing this all at once. With that, I'll ask Jack to make some comments about the Dads Club. He can speak to some specifics with regard to the contribution that they would make to this effort.
Good evening. Really, on behalf of 12,000 kids in the Carmel Dads Club and 7,000 Carmel Clay family residents, we just want to say thank you. We have a very unique partnership that we feel blessed with the Dads Club that's now gone on nearly 55 years. So thank you very much. As Roger stated, really through conversation that we had, and actually with Jim and Mr. Williams at the high school, the Dads Club over the last 5 years has saw the need to improve its programming by putting money into facilities. And when we've done that with baseball fields at Gray Road, with Badger, with Shirley O'Maya, with Pittman property out on the west side, we've tried to make improvements to those facilities to give a better family experience. That's really what it's all about. And we think we've made a big impact. One of the things we've identified over the last couple of years is the need for field turf in our programming. The reason for this really is from a standpoint, for several reasons, but the main reason is we're starting to see a lot of the sports programming go into some of the winter months, such as October through December. I mean, really in early December we can get out and do some things outside. And then the evaluations for spring sports starting in late February through March, where that would really come into play. Obviously the facilities would be used all the time around the clock. Probably no better example than what occurred to us this spring with the very moist spring that we had. The fields were severely damaged at all of our properties, and we could have taken a lot of this use to the field turf fields, which would have maintained those fields a little bit better. The other thing that I think comes into play there is over the last couple of years we've been able to reach out and talk to some specialists in this area in regards to injury prevention, which I think is very important, and just the usage, being able to use it around the clock without tearing up natural turf. So we felt strongly that when I had gone to Roger, we initially had proposed doing some field turf fields at Badger. One of the issues there is we're currently using all that space for other sports, number one, and number two, the parking situation. So as Roger and mine and Jimmy's conversations took off a little bit, we talked about the need for Carmel High School in field turf, ways to help gym classes, help the performing arts, help obviously the athletics as well. And we started looking at what made a lot of sense there. I mean, you're talking about a field turf field at Murray, which obviously soccer and lacrosse needs desperately. Obviously the recovering of the high school football stadium, but the two fields up top, the amount of usage that these fields would get between multiple sports. I mean, we're not just talking for one sport. This is for all sports. It just made a lot of sense with the parking that's available there. And honestly, the Dads Club's identified it as the main thing that we would like to do in moving forward. With that comes a commitment from the Dads Club. We have a very unique partnership that I get calls from across the country all the time to say, how do you have this great relationship with the school system? And it's one that only gets stronger and stronger all the time, and we're very thankful for that. But when we have the opportunity to partner in a way like this, to show you a commitment, the Dads Club is very, very prepared to make a strong financial investment into making this happen. And, I guess from our end, we want to just say thank you again. We feel blessed to have this kind of a relationship. So thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
If I could just make some
Please.
final comments. We haven't worked out entirely the specifics in terms of the financial arrangement, but as Jack and I have talked about this, I think the Dads Club intent would be to provide what would be the equivalent of paying for one of those two fields. Now, that payment may come in their world, that may come in the form of cash or donations. Could be a combination of the two. We've had some experience with this. Years ago, we partnered to, a couple of times comes to mind, the River Road soccer fields, for example. That was a partnership where the school paid for part of that, and the Dads Club paid for, I believe, the parking and the hard surface areas out there. And then earlier than that yet, years ago, when Dr. Teagarden was here, and we moved the soccer fields from Spring Mill out to Shelburne, we partnered in the effort to move those fields. And so we've had great success at overall with certainly the Dads Club, but also specific to partnering. Yet another example was at the high school where the Dads Club contributed $500,000 toward that project in the 90s. And so these have been, and all of these are, we're talking about Carmel's taxpayers in one way or another. I mean, his members are also community members, obviously, and taxpayers as well. And this community, I think, in some ways, from a taxing standpoint, is fortunate that, in a lot of ways with the Dad's Club, but not the least of which, their programs in most communities are supported from a tax base, either through a parks department or something along that line. And so here in this community, they rely on fees and to the parents and donations from other businesses and so forth. So in the end result is it's a very between what the school does and the partnership with the Dad's Club is very beneficial to the taxpayer community.
Thank you. Are we ready to entertain questions? Mr. Phillips.
First of all, Roger and Mr. Berry, thank you for collaborating on this. Anytime we can have cooperation and collaboration between different segments of our community, I think we have synergy that benefits kids, which is really what it's all about. Look forward to seeing the details, and I trust that'll be forthcoming sometime soon. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
I do have a question for you. I want to make sure I understood this correctly. So what we have sort of slated for 2014 is already to replace the football turf and to turf the soccer field?
Yes.
And so what we are seeking now is we're discussing approval for adding 2 additional turfs to be, or 2 additional fields to be turfed.
That's correct, and basically one of which would be an additional add to the school corporation.
Right.
Dad's Club would pay the other. At Carmel High School, and you'll see as we present our capital projects fund, but it's sometimes hard for me to remember that about a third of this entire school district is Carmel High School. And so when you see projects in our capital fund, and at some point you might say, well, it seems like all we do is work at Carmel High School. Part of it's because that's a third of our entire facilities. And the work that was done in the 90s, the field house, the swimming pool and all that, we're now to the point where it's time to replace finishes and flooring and paint and those kinds of things. And we can only do so much of that in any one year without being disruptive to the educational program. So we're fully intending and are planning to do that basically as much as we can do during the summer, because we don't feel it necessary to disrupt the school year. So you'll see that, and in our next 3-year plan for 14, 15, and 16, we had already planned for finishers and so forth at Carmel High School. And so what we're seeing here is just an opportunity to, in other words, over a 3-year period of time, we would have liked to have included that practice field anyhow. And so, but not necessarily this year, except it seems compelling that if we're going to do it, if we can do it all at once and get the financial benefit of the volume of that, and then you add to that the possibility of partnering with the Dad's Club to gain an additional field at no cost to the taxpayers, it just seems like a pretty good plan.
Mrs. Niles?
Yes. The drainage of the fields, I mean, that's built into the turf, and so that makes it available even when it's freezing outside. I mean, does the water go down underneath it and totally dissipates, or?
I think the short answer is yes, until you got about the freezing part. But for sure, the drainage, then you're beyond my scope of knowledge. But but yes, as a matter of fact, a good portion of the cost to do a turf field is everything but the turf. It's all the prep work, the drainage, as you say. Now, when you do projects like this, you have to capture the water, the runoff, and so
Right. Okay.
sometimes that involves water storage tanks, because the code is such that you can't run it into the sewer system, and so you have that and concrete curbs. In the case of the football field, when we do the field, we will also do some of you are familiar with the so-called D zone, or at the end of the field, that there's a small area that's still grass, and so we'd like for not to have any grass there. It's not, it's not a very good thing from a maintenance standpoint. So, so almost probably half of the project is the cost of the actual turf, and the other half is for the things that you're describing.
Okay, and the practice fields, can you tell me what they're basically used for and what they would be used for if the Dad's Club and we had a partnership with them.
Yes. Seeing where the football field is at, just north and west at the end of that parking lot, there's a band tower there now that was built several years ago. And so, and of course, that was built, and it's high, so because those practice fields are used by the band to practice. And now with having turfed the football field, that they use the football field a lot more than they ever could in the past because they're not tearing up the surface. But they also use that area certainly, and would continue to use that area. So I think it's a matter that with artificial turf, it creates so many opportunities to use these grassy areas much more, probably by the same groups, but they just have an opportunity to use it a lot more, and it'll maintain a consistent condition, whereas we all understand that grass is subject to weather conditions, and so we sometimes, by the end of the football season, that turf can be in pretty bad shape if it's natural grass. But we also anticipate, since we did in 10 years, I don't know offhand how much Carmel High School has grown, but it's a lot. And so we just, we have increasing numbers of students as compared to what we had 10, 15 years ago. And then from a participation standpoint, as Jimmy alluded to, lacrosse is one sport that comes to mind that is far advanced in terms of participation now as compared to where it was at 10 or 15 years ago. And so while it's not currently a sanctioned sport at Carmel High School, I have a hunch you'll be addressing that one of these days in the near future. And we have a very close relationship with the club sport at this time, and so they do use the facilities to the extent they're available.
Do the PE classes use the Murray Stadium as well as, since it's closer to the school than moving all the way out to the practice fields?
They do to a certain extent, but really the use of that field is primarily in the fall by soccer. They play about 40 to 45 games a year there, and it gets pretty well chewed up. So by the time we get to October, then it goes back into the repair process. So for the most part, in the spring, it almost stays dormant for the most part in recovery mode moving on. So we do.
If we put turf in there, could we use it for PE classes and things?
It's wide open, and I think they'll do thumb wrestling to figure out which class goes there versus walking out to the stadium. So.
Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Freed.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Barry if he remembers any exciting games at Murray Stadium when it used to be the Carmel Bowl.
It was an exciting place, I'll tell you. In the
Same
70s,
grass.
80s, 90s, it was a great place. So
It was
a lot of great memories.
Best place to watch a football game.
It was awesome. Mrs. Niles, to answer your question from our standpoint, we would be using it for all of our sports. It might be set up for a specific sport, but we'd like to have evaluations for baseball and softball even to utilize it. So it's going to be used for a lot of different sports, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
One of the possibilities with one of these fields would be to not, and again, we haven't made these kind of decisions, but we know they're out there. It would be to not stripe the field for football or soccer. It'd be just green, and we'd actually put the striping on it. Because what happens now at the high school, the football field, of course, is set up for football, but when the other sports, soccer, lacrosse, typically lacrosse in particular, now you have to put more stripes. And it's a little bit like a basketball court. At some point, you have all kinds of, you have so many stripes, it gets a bit confusing, and certainly aesthetically is not the greatest thing. So it's possible we would have some of this space where it would be, the stripes wouldn't be permanent, you might say, and they would be applied based on how the field was being used.
Kind of to Roger's point, one of the things that's changed a lot in the last 10 years that we're all well aware of, but it's had a significant impact on scheduling is daylight savings time. And with that, it's really allowed us, in our partnership with the Carmel Dads Club, to utilize some outdoor facilities on into the evening, almost kind of that, you have that early practice, so to speak, and then an early evening practice, which we could not do before just because of daylight. So there's no proposal to add any lighting to this because right now really there's no need for it. But that's while some people aren't real happy about that change by the state of Indiana, it's had a great benefit for that type of use. So.
I had one last question. You had also indicated that ultimately you'd like to see the middle schools, their fields turfed as well. What type of long-range plan are you thinking?
I don't have a specific year in mind. It's something that we've talked about for a number of years, that it would, kind of like when we started with the football field, it would be nice to do that. But there's no question that certainly our academic needs and so forth take priority over that. And so when we get to a point where we, like here, I think, where we feel that it would be appropriate to include that as a part of our expenditures, we do see many of the same advantages at a middle school that are at the high school. Of course, we're talking about one field there, not multiple fields, but for really the same types of reasons that it's beneficial at a high school. There are some places that, by the way, that talk about this as though it will pay for itself because of the maintenance and so forth. I've never taken that approach because, one, I don't believe that it does pay for itself. But I do think that that is a factor. And so I wouldn't suggest that it'll pay for itself because of the maintenance, because there's maintenance on artificial turf as well. However, I don't know that certainly this maintenance is more you can anticipate it and plan for it and budget for it. Whereas with natural grass, depends on, when you have a drought like we had the last couple of years, those things really, drive up the cost when you're talking about natural conditions. And so I think there is some savings over the life of the product that would at least offset some of the cost.
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. One more question. It's kind of a green question. You were talking about the runoff coming off the fields and possibly putting it into tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Do we reuse that water?
Yes.
Do we use it out at the stadium for that?
We might. Cherry Tree Softball Complex, for example, that's not turf, but when we did that project, we were required to, really. We had to retain the water, so that there are underground tanks at Cherry Tree that are capturing that runoff water. And then I believe we are using that for irrigation. And
okay.
So we capture the water and then put it back on in the form of irrigation.
So, excuse me. So you have this proposal, or this is a proposed partnership. What is the next step?
The next step would be we will likely come as early as the next school board meeting with a specific recommendation. And at that point, we will include, certainly in writing and some details surrounding it. And then I would also plan to include the project in our 2014 capital budget. Now, by including it, that doesn't mean that's your last chance to deal with it, as you all know. That's just the first step. It would be the first step in this, also the first step in the whole process of establishing a capital projects fund plan, and it's not until sometime just prior to November that you would be asked to actually vote and act on that plan and that related budget. So there's more time than that, certainly, and until we finally award bids, even then nothing's happened. Certainly we would feel that you would be intending to support the project, or we wouldn't get clear to the end, but that would be the timing.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much, Mr. Inskeep, Mr. Berry, and Mr. McMichael.
Thank you.
Moving right along, we have, perfect. Then we move on to board member reports, and we have one this evening with Mrs. Hackett.
Thank you very much. Since January, I've had the privilege of working as the board liaison to the superintendent search. And through this role, I've been able to keep our community updated on our website via the help of Tricia Reynolds, Community Relations Coordinator, and then also board reports here at the meeting. I'm very excited to say that I believe tonight's remarks might be my last report on the superintendent search. Since the beginning of the process, the board's goal was always to find the next best leader for our district. During the initial phases of our search, we did meet some very qualified leaders, but the board was never confident that it was the right match for our district. What we valued most from these initial phases was the input from all of you, our community. You and I believe we had over 500 comments or input through our focus groups from our community. That input was extremely valuable. We used that to devise the leadership profile that listed the qualifications that we were looking for when we'd interview people. And this really became our go-to document, whether researching, interviewing, what have you. It was invaluable. The board's summer began with a more focused approach. Dr. Ron Barnes with our search firm, BWP and Associates, and then Dr. Teagarden, our interim superintendent, targeted a number of candidates, then referred several to the board for serious consideration. Board members vetted these individuals independently and thoroughly, and then met to determine which one candidate really we thought would be our district's next best leader. Eventually, an interview took place, and we were confident that we found someone whose experience and philosophy aligned extraordinarily well with the leadership profile, but also our district's strategic plan and our district's vision. Again, I am more than excited to announce the board's intent to hire Dr. Nicholas Wall as our next superintendent of Carmel Clay Schools. But let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Wall first. Little Nick Wall grew up in Ferdinand, Indiana, that's southern Indiana, and then later began his teaching career as a middle school science teacher. From there, he gained experience as a middle school athletic director, an elementary school principal, and assistant superintendent. In addition to that, then he gained 11 years of experience as a public school superintendent. He served as superintendent of Community Unit School District 201 in Westmont, Illinois from 2002 to 2005, and then superintendent at Hinsdale High School District 86 from 2005 to 2013. Dr. Wall's professional strengths are numerous, I believe we found, but let me just hit on three that caught the eye of the board. He's a very student-centered approach that emphasizes the development of the whole child. Second, he emphasizes a genuinely collaborative planning process. So be ready when he asks for your opinion. He means it. And third, he seemed to have a true comprehension of the dynamic that surrounds public schools nowadays and how that necessitates working with our our state-level decision makers. In line with new Indiana law, Dr. Wall's contract is posted on our website. A public hearing is set for August 20th at 5:30 p.m. in this building. Final approval for the hiring of Dr. Wall is anticipated during a special meeting August 28th at 6:45 a.m. in this building, central offices. But I do want to take a final moment here to thank you, our community, for your input and your patience and your confidence during this intricate process. Dr. Wall has already begun some transition activities, and as Layla pointed out, he sits here in our audience tonight watching intently. So when you do get a moment, please join us and take a moment to welcome him to our Carmel Clay family. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hackett. That was very comprehensive, and I really appreciate your welcome to Dr. Wall. And next, we have Dr. Teagarden.
And before I give my brief transition report, I'm going to ask Dr. Dudley to provide you with the latest information about ISTEP test results. There really is no latest information, but she can report it very well, and she's intending to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Teagarden. And as you will recall, back in the spring, our students with students all over the state did experienced interruptions with ISTEP testing when we did the online testing due to issues with CTB McGraw, the vendor of ISTEP. And so the state engaged with an independent evaluator to determine if those interruptions affected the scores of the ISTEP scores. And what the evaluation determined was that the overall average of scores in Indiana was not affected by the interruptions. However, that's not to say that individual students were not affected by the interruptions. So now what we are waiting on is for the state to process the students' individual ISTEP scores and then to release those scores, and we do not have a timeline yet from the Indiana Department of Education. We are still waiting on that, and as we continue to look for that, that is still to be determined by the Indiana Department of Ed. So, as Dr. Teagarden said, we really don't have any news at this point, but we are eagerly awaiting those scores from our students.
Amy, you might address Layla's question about the remediation.
Sure. And one of the questions is Mrs. Spanberg asked before the board meeting. We do, with ISTEP, we have a remediation program of students that are at risk, and we also have an intervention program to look for students that may be at risk and to catch them before they actually fail. And then our remediation program picks up when students do fail ISTEP. We make sure that we go back and remediate and clear up any of those deficits so our students can be successful. We will continue with that intervention program starting this school year. We don't have ISTEP scores. I don't anticipate that we'll have them Wednesday. However, we do have a lot of other data on our individual students so that we will continue to target our students that may possibly be at risk and continue with that intervention program just as we would in any other school year. And then once we do have those ISTEP results too, we'll continue with that remediation piece so that we're making sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students.
Any questions for Amy? She said nothing really well, did she?
Thank you, Dr. Dudley. Dr. Teagarden.
I am going to make a brief report on superintendent transition. And this is the same report that I provided our cabinet today. For all intents and purposes, the public portion of the transition is beyond us. Tonight ends that. I'm serving as your interim superintendent, sitting in this chair for the final time. There's a new sheriff in town, and one of the things I said to the cabinet this morning, the worst thing that Nick and I could do would be to confuse everyone and make them think that there were two sheriffs. And so this idea of writing a memo to me and copying him, or writing him and copying me, we felt could really become confusing and counterproductive. And from an economic standpoint, I can't imagine that you folks would want to continue to compensate me to come and watch him work. It's fascinating, but probably not worth a per diem. So, from this point forward, I've been taken out of the Carmel Clay email system. Emails that come to me will go directly, that were coming to me, will go directly to Nick. And from this point forward, communication and correspondence will be at Dr. Wall's suggestion. I'll continue to be under contract until August 28th, when you approve his contract. But the services I will provide will be only at Dr. Wall's suggestion. If he wants to meet with me, I'll meet with him. If he wants to talk on the phone, we'll talk on the phone. If he wants me to review documents or literature and so forth, I'll do that. The only exception to that is that at your August 20th hearing on the contract that is publicized, Dr. Wall will not be present for that public hearing, but I will be. And that, I think, will probably be the last official act. Your board meeting on the 27th, and by the way, I've reviewed all this with our legal counsel to make sure that we're totally consistent with the new regulations that you operate under. I will still be listed with the Department of Education as your interim superintendent until the 28th of August. anything that requires an official superintendent's signature, and there are not a lot of things, but anything that does, I'll provide that signature. But otherwise, there's a new sheriff in town. And I shouldn't let this opportunity pass without saying that the last couple of months has been kind of an interesting trip down memory lane in some regards, and I appreciate the fact that particularly those of you who knew me had enough confidence to invite me back. You knew I was only going to be here for a short time. I know that's the only reason you did that. The August 26th board meeting, there will be one.
Yes.
And there will be nobody sitting in this chair. Legal counsel suggested that Nick could sit at the table and would be here in an advisory capacity. He's really serving as a consultant, much the same way as you. But just so that there's no problem associated with saying that you've got a superintendent before you have a superintendent, he'll be here that evening and work with you as a consultant.
Okay.
And then the following meeting, he'll sit in this chair. Okay. Right. So it's been fun. Thank you for inviting me in, and good luck. By the way, you've got a good guy here, and great things are going to continue to happen in the Carmel Clay Schools under his leadership and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you much, Dr. Teagarden. I don't know that any of us expected that transition. We thought we had at least another opportunity to, I suppose, say our goodbyes and our thank yous for all of your work. It was instrumental in helping our school system through the transition. Your calm, authoritative demeanor really moved us in the right direction. Your leadership is greatly appreciated, and thank you very, very much. Does anybody else? Yes, please, Mr. Phillips.
If this is our last opportunity to tell Dr. Teagarden exactly what we think, I think we all express thanks for accepting our invitation to be with us, and your report is typical of your tenure here. It was delivered thoroughly, with thoughtfulness and humor. So thank you, Doctor.
I'm sorry, I can't pass up this opportunity. I could go on and on, but I just want to thank you for your insight. I think you have quite a talent, and I'm glad we got to share in it. Thank your wife for sharing you, too.
We might as well go down the line. I want to thank you, too, and it's too bad that I've aged so much in like 20 years, and you haven't really aged at all. But as usual, you did provide a really good source of leadership, and I feel like as a new board member, I gained a little bit more insight into what good boardmanship will be. Thank you.
I must. I know we began in different circumstances, me as a teacher, you as the superintendent, and my knowledge of you. And this was a very different way to get to know you and to know how you work with people and how you are very on top of issues, and you respond very well to people who email you or come to you with issues, and I appreciated that a lot. And it's been a very great 3 months, so thank you.
Well, it truly has been a pleasure. So thank you very much. And well, basically on behalf of the board, thank you for joining us this evening, and we wish you the very best for a very positive, successful 2013-14 school year. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Yes, so would mine. It wasn't about the Okay. Don't turn around because that would be unfair.
Very reasonable.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Dillon.